Stop calling my name in the market. People are looking. Chioma froze in the middle of the walkway at Ogbeat Market, both hands still holding the breakfast she had bought for her friend, the way she did every single morning for the past 4 years. Stella, what did you say? The girl standing in front of her, the one who had slept on the same mat, with her in a cramped rented room for 4 years, the one who had held her, and cried all night, when her mother was hospitalized, the one she had skipped lunch for a whole month to buy a birthday gift, looked her up and down. She looked at the worn apron of a hired shop girl. At the plastic slippers, with the heels worn flat. At the 2 hands still dusted, with fabric lint. At the banana leaf parcel of breakfast in her hands. Then Stella said, loud enough for the whole row of stalls to hear. Chioma, let me be honest with you. We're not the same class anymore. The girl standing behind her giggled. Look at you, Stella went on, her voice as light, as if she were discussing the weather. The same apron every day. Selling fabric for Mama Chioma, from 6 in the morning to 7 at night. This afternoon, Emeka is taking me to eat at the Golden Palm Hotel. You think I can bring you along? Chioma stood there. The parcel in her hands suddenly felt as heavy as stone. I just bought you breakfast. You messaged this morning that you hadn't eaten. Stella glanced at the banana leaf. Then she laughed, the laugh Chioma would remember for the rest of her life. 50 naira food? Chioma, do you even know where Emeka took me for breakfast this morning? Forget it. You wouldn't understand. Then she turned, linked arms with her new friends, and walked toward the gleaming black car waiting at the market gate. Chioma stood alone in the walkway, still holding the parcel she had bought, with yesterday's wages. Around her, the market women had seen everything. Some looked away. Some shook their heads. One of them said aloud, that Stella has really started carrying her head too high. Chioma said nothing. She simply bent down, retied her apron, and went back to Mama Chioma's fabric stall. She did not cry. Not because it did not hurt. But because her mother had taught her something, when she was very small: tears do not cook rice, and the poor do not have the luxury of collapsing in the middle of the road. 7 years later, that same girl would stand in front of Chioma once again. But this time, she would not be standing tall. And what Chioma did in that moment left everyone present speechless. Stay with me until the end of this story. And if you have ever been looked down on by the very person you loved most, subscribe right now, because this story is for you. This is the story of Chioma. Chioma Ease grew up in a single rented room in the Uwani area of Enugu. 1 room. 3 people. Her mother, herself, and her younger brother Obi. Her father died when she was 13. He was a motorcycle mechanic, and one afternoon he simply never came home. After the funeral, her mother sat on the floor all night, not crying aloud, just sitting. The next morning she rose, retied her head wrap, and went to look for work washing clothes for 3 well-off families in the Independence layout area. From that day, her mother's hands were never whole again. The soap ate at her skin. The cracks on her fingertips never fully closed. Every evening she soaked her hands in warm salt water, and she never complained once. Chioma always remembered one evening, when she was 14, watching her mother soak her hands. She asked, "Mama, does it hurt?" Her mother looked at her, and said the words Chioma would carry all her life. "My daughter, my hands hurt, because they are working. There are hands that never hurt, because they never do anything. Which hands do you think are worth more?" Chioma could not answer. But that night she lay awake thinking for a long time. And there was another thing her mother often said, a proverb she repeated so many times, that Chioma knew it by heart. "My child, slow water still reaches the sea. But the heavy rainstorm is loud, and it scatters, before it arrives anywhere." Chioma was slow water. She always knew that. There were things about those early years she never told anyone. How she learned to fall asleep to the sound of her mother's hands moving in a basin of water long after midnight. How, on the mornings there was only enough food for two, her mother would say she wasn't hungry, and drink a cup of water instead, and how Chioma pretended to believe her, because a child learns quickly, which lies are made of love. They were poor in money, but her mother refused to let them be poor in dignity. The one room was always swept. Their 2 sets of clothes were always clean and pressed. "We may not have much," her mother would say, "but no one will ever look at my children and see people who gave up." That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep in Chioma, in a place she could not yet name, and it never left. When she finished secondary school, Chioma could not continue. Not because she was a poor student, she ranked 3rd in the entire school. But the night she brought home her admission letter, she saw her mother sitting, and counting loose coins in a tin box, counting them 3 times over, as if the 4th count might make the money grow. The next morning, Chioma folded the letter, tucked it into the bottom of her suitcase, and went to Ogbeat Market to look for work. She was 18. Mama Ifeoman Wankwo, who owned a large fabric stall in the innermost row, took her on, as a hired shop girl. The monthly wage was enough to eat, never enough to spare. And on her very first day of work, Chioma met Stella. Stella Nwodo had just been hired at the stall next door, the one selling accessories, handbags, and shoes. She was also 18, had also just finished secondary school, also had no money to continue. But the two of them were as different as water and fire. Stella was lively, talkative, loud laughing, with a gift for making customers happy enough to buy something they had not planned to buy. She knew everyone's name in the whole row, after only 3 days. Chioma was quiet. Careful. She remembered exactly every bolt of fabric, every price, every customer who still owed money. No one thought the two would become close. But one afternoon, Stella forgot her lunch, and she had not been paid yet. Chioma, even though her own lunch was only white rice, with a little vegetable, and 2 slices of dried fish, quietly split it in half. Stella looked at that meager portion, then at Chioma. And she did not mock it, not for a second. She ate it all, then said, "Tomorrow I'll bring lunch for both of us." And she kept her word. For 4 years. The two rented a small room together near the market to save money. Walked to the market together in the morning. Walked home together at night. Slept on the same mat. Shared every packet of noodles. Stella taught Chioma how to sell, how to talk to difficult customers. Chioma taught Stella how to remember numbers, how to check stock, so nothing went missing. When Chioma's mother was hospitalized, from exhaustion, it was Stella, who sat with her in the hospital corridor all night, saying nothing, just holding her hand. Chioma had believed that friendship was something permanent. She had believed it with her whole heart. But the 2 roads began to split, from that very first year in the market. And the reason was simple, the 2 of them spent their wages differently. Stella bought clothes. Bought lipstick. Ate out with the crowd, from the outer rows. On weekends she went out, with the girls, who sold cosmetics. Chioma did something no one understood at the time. She enrolled in an evening accounting class. The class was in a vocational center 3 kilometers from the market, running from 7:30 to 9:30 at night, 3 nights a week. The fee ate up nearly a third of her monthly wage. Which meant Chioma's day looked like this: up at 5, help her mother wash a basin of clothes, at the market by 6, on her feet selling, until 7 at night, then a 3-kilometer walk to class, study until 9:30, and a walk home, that got her to the room close to 11. Then she would sit at the small plastic table in the corner of the room, open her books, and study until 1 in the morning. Stella watched her and shook her head. "What are you studying that for? Who are you going to be an accountant for?" "We sell things for other people." "I don't plan to sell things for other people my whole life," Chioma said. "Everyone says that." Chioma did not argue. She just bent back over the page. There were nights she fell asleep on her books, and woke at 4, with ink printed on her cheek. There were days she was so tired her legs shook, as she stood selling. There was one night of heavy rain, when she walked 3 kilometers to class soaked to the skin, sat through 2 hours in wet clothes, then walked 3 kilometers back. But she did not miss a single class. Not one. In her 3rd year at the market, Emika appeared. Emika Nady was 31, drove a black SUV, and wore a watch a hired shop girl had to look at twice, before daring to guess the price. People said he worked in oil and gas in Port Harcourt, and came up to Enugu now and then for business. He stopped by the accessory stall to buy a handbag, as a gift. Stella served him. 3 days later, the black SUV began parking at the market gate. And Stella changed. Not gradually. Very fast, so fast that Chioma could barely understand what was happening. First the clothes. Then hair extensions. Then a new phone. Then photos taken at restaurants Chioma had only ever walked past from outside. Then Stella quit the accessories stall. Emika told me to stop. Standing in the market all day ruins your looks. Then she moved out of their shared room, into a nicer place in the Trans Ekalu area, that Emika rented for her. Then came the way Stella talked. "Are you still standing at Mama Ifeoma's stall?" She asked one day, when she stopped by the market to shop. "Yes." Stella made a face. "Chioma, don't you feel ashamed? Selling fabric in the middle of the market. What if someone you know walks by, and sees you?" Chioma looked at her friend for a long moment. Then she said, very calmly, "I would feel more ashamed to let my mother wash clothes alone, while I sit doing nothing." Stella said nothing. But from that day, she began to avoid Chioma in front of crowds. And then came, that morning in the middle of the market. The morning Chioma had bought a food parcel in advance, because Stella had messaged early, that she hadn't eaten. The morning Chioma carried a banana leaf parcel to look for her friend among the crowded rows of stalls. The morning Stella looked her up and down and said, "We're not the same class anymore." That night Chioma went to class as usual. Still walked the 3 kilometers. Still sat in the front row. But back in the room, she sat staring at a page for a full hour, without reading a single word. Her mother, lying on the mat, opened her eyes. "Chioma, what's wrong?" "Nothing, Mama. My daughter, I gave birth to you. When your breathing changes even a little, I know." Chioma was silent for a long while. Then she told her. She told her everything. And when she reached the words "we're not the same class anymore," her voice finally broke. Her mother sat up. She did not comfort her right away. She let her daughter cry it all out. Then she said, "Do you know why she was able to say that?" Chioma shook her head. "Because she is standing on a ladder she did not build herself. A person standing on their own ladder never needs to look down on anyone. Only the person who is borrowing has to look down, to remind themselves that they are up high." She took her daughter's 2 hands in hers. "But you are building your own ladder. One rung at a time. With these very hands. So listen to me, do not waste a single tear on those words. Just keep building your next rung." Chioma nodded. And that is exactly what she did. She did not message Stella. She did not demand an explanation. She did not speak a single bad word about Stella to anyone in the market, not even when the market women pressed her to. She did only one thing, she worked. And something happened at that fabric stall, about 6 months later, that would change her entire life. Mama Ifeoma had been watching Chioma for a long time. She had noticed that this girl took out a book to study when there were no customers. She had noticed that she was never late. She had noticed that when a customer overpaid, she always ran, after them to return it, even when Mama Ifeoma said, "Just leave it." One evening, when the market had emptied, Mama Ifeoma called her over. "Chioma, what is it you study at night?" "Accounting, Ma. My certificate exam is coming soon." She nodded. Then she pushed toward her a thick, battered notebook, crammed with messy handwritten numbers. "This is my bookkeeping. For 30 years I've kept it like this. All I know is, if there's money left at the end of the month, I'm happy, and if there's none, I worry. I don't know where the money goes." She looked at Chioma. "Can you look at it for me?" Chioma took the notebook home. That night she stayed up, until 3 in the morning. 3 days later, she brought Mama Ifeoma a neat handwritten spreadsheet. And she showed her 3 things. She was buying one type of fabric, from a source 20% more expensive than another. The floral print she assumed was her most profitable line was actually losing money, because it sat in stock too long. And 2 customers had owed her money for 8 months, that she had completely forgotten. Mama Ifeoma stared at the paper for a long time. Then she looked at the hired shop girl standing in front of her. "Sit down here," she said. "From tomorrow, you don't stand and sell anymore. You do my books. I'll pay you double." That was the first rung. And it did not stop there. Because Ogbeat Market is a village, anything spreads within a week. The spice seller across the way heard, and brought her notebook over. Then the plastic goods seller at the head of the row. Then the shoe seller in the outer row. By day, Chioma kept Mama Ifeoma's books. At night, after class, she took on bookkeeping for the other traders, charging very little. There was one trader she never forgot, Maman Kiru, who sold Gary at the edge of the market, and had been certain for years that her business was failing. She was ready to close it, and send her children to live with relatives. Chioma spent one night, with her tattered records, and discovered the truth: the business was not failing at all. Maman Kiru had simply been taking money from the same drawer to feed her family, never separating what was hers to spend from what belonged to the business. In 3 months, with Chioma showing her how to keep the two apart, Maman Kiru not only kept her children, she added a second bag of Gary to her stock. She wept the day she understood, and she told everyone in that row that a girl, who used to sell fabric, had saved her family. Word like that does not walk in a market. It runs. At 22, Chioma passed her accounting certificate. Her mother could not attend the small ceremony. There was washing to be delivered that day, but that evening she cooked jollof rice. The first time in months there had been meat in the pot, and the 2 of them ate in the little room, and laughed until Obi asked what was so funny. Meanwhile, Stella's life was going in an entirely different direction. Emeka bought her a phone. Then handbags. Then gold. Stella stopped working altogether. She slept until noon, went to get her hair done, took photos, and waited for Emeka to come up to Enugu. Her old friends slowly disappeared from her life, partly because she pulled away, partly because she had told too many people that they were not the same class. Then things began to crack. First, Emeka's trips to Port Harcourt got longer. Then he began not answering his phone in the evenings. Then there were whole weeks when the black SUV was nowhere to be seen. Stella asked. Emeka got angry. "Are you interrogating me? Do you know how busy I am?" And Stella went quiet. Then she found out she was pregnant. She called Emeka, her hands shaking, with nervous hope, because in her mind, this might be the moment he married her. Emeka was silent for 3 seconds on the other end. Then he said, "Are you sure it's mine?" Stella could not breathe. "What did you say?" "Stella, I have a family. My wife is in Port Harcourt." "I thought you knew." "Everybody knows that." She sank down, onto the floor of the very room he had rented for her. You never told me." "You never asked either," Emeka said. Then he sighed, the sigh of a man doing arithmetic. Fine. I'll send you some money. But don't call me again. Understand? Then he hung up. The money arrived the next day. Then his number stopped connecting. Then at the end of the month, the landlord came to say the rent had expired, and no one was paying it anymore. Stella moved out of that room with 2 suitcases of beautiful clothes, and not 1 naira in her pocket. She did not dare go home. Her father was a traditional Igbo man, and she knew exactly what would happen if he found out. And she did not dare go back to Ogbeat Market either. Because the whole market had watched her get into that SUV. The whole market had heard her say the words "not the same class." She realized something terrible: she had no one left to call. All the same class friends had vanished at the same time as the black car. The girls who had giggled behind her in the market, the ones who admired her handbags and her photos, not one of them answered when the money was gone. It turned out they had never been her friends at all. They had been friends with the SUV. And the only person who had ever split a portion of white rice with her on their first day of work, the one who would have answered on the first ring, who would have taken her in, without a single question, she had driven that person away in the middle of the market, in front of everyone, with a laugh. That, more than the hunger, more than the fear, was the thing that kept Stella awake at night. Not what Emeka had done to her. What she had done to Chioma. Meanwhile, Chioma kept climbing her own ladder. Over 4 years of doing the trader's books, she saw something no one else saw. There were thousands of small businesses in Enugu operating exactly like Mama Ifeoma once had, messy records, no idea where the money went, losing money without knowing they were losing it. No one helped them. Because the big accounting firms would not take small clients like that. And the traders themselves did not even know they needed help. So Chioma did something everyone called crazy. She quit the fabric stall entirely, and opened a small accounting service just for tiny businesses, with 300,000 naira saved over 6 years, an old laptop, and a rented room 9 square meters in size, right near the market gate. Her first client was Mama Ifeoma. Her second was the spice seller across the way. Her third was the plastic goods seller at the head of the row. And then the good word spread, in the exact way only a market can spread it. There's a young accountant, used to sell fabric for Mama Ifeoma, charges very little, and she tells you exactly where your money goes. After 1 year, she had 40 clients. After 2 years, she hired 2 staff. After 4 years, her company, she named it Ndidi Consulting, Ndidi being the Igbo word for patience, had 12 staff, and served more than 300 small businesses across Enugu state. She bought her mother a small house in Uwani. Not large, but with a yard, its own kitchen, and a water tap she never had to queue for. The day she brought her mother to the new house, the older woman walked from room to room, touching every wall, and could not say a single word for 15 minutes. Then she turned, took her daughter's hands that were whole now, soft again, and she said, "The slow water has reached the sea, my daughter." Her brother Obi graduated in engineering. It was his sister who paid the fees. And there was one more thing Chioma did, that no one asked her to. Every Saturday morning she went back to Ogbeat Market, sat at a plastic table set up near the gate, and taught any trader who wanted to learn how to keep their books for free. The market women called her the market's accountant. 7 years after, that morning in the middle of the market, Chioma was 29. And then, one Thursday afternoon, Stella walked into her office. Chioma had no warning. She was in a meeting with 2 of her staff, when the receptionist knocked to say a woman was asking to see her privately, no appointment, saying she was an old friend. The woman who walked into her office 10 minutes later was much thinner than Chioma remembered. Hair tied back plainly, no makeup. An old blouse ironed very carefully, the kind of careful ironing only the poor do, to make up for the fact that the cloth is worn. And in her arms was a boy of about 6. Stella stood in the doorway. She looked around the room, at the nameplate on the desk, at the shelves, through the glass at the staff working outside. Then she looked at Chioma. And she burst into tears. Chioma. I'm sorry. Chioma rose from her desk. Do you know what Chioma could have done in that moment? She could have repeated the words, from the market. She could have let Stella stand there, and taste exactly what she had tasted 7 years earlier. She could have said one single sentence, and left that woman shattered. And not one person on earth would have blamed her. If it were you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. But Chioma did not do that. She walked around her desk. She went to Stella. And the first thing she did was bend down to look at the boy holding his mother's hand. What's your name? My name is Chitty. Chitty, are you hungry? The boy looked at his mother. Then he nodded, very slightly. Chioma called out the door, Kechi, please buy 2 plates of food, and a bottle of orange juice for me. Then she pulled out a chair, and said to Stella, her voice as normal, as if they had seen each other last week. Sit down. You look exhausted. Stella sat, and cried even harder. She told her everything. About Emeka. About being abandoned. About not daring to go home for 2 years, giving birth alone at the house of a distant acquaintance. About finally having to kneel, before her father, being thrown out of the house once, and 3 months later her mother secretly taking her, and the child back. About the 6 years since, selling breakfast on the roadside, washing dishes for an eatery, doing hourly domestic work, doing whatever it took to raise Chitty. I didn't come here to ask for money, Stella said, wiping her face. Truly. I came because, last week I passed, through Ogbeat Market. I heard the traders talking about, the market's accountant. And then they said your name. She looked down at her own 2 hands. I stood there crying in the middle of the market like a madwoman. Then I went home, and it took me a week, before I dared come here. I just wanted to say sorry, before I died, without ever getting to say it. She looked up. The thing I said to you in the market that day. For 7 years there hasn't been a night I didn't think about it. You bought me breakfast. You carried a food parcel, through the market to find me. And I. She could not finish the sentence. Chioma was silent for a moment. Then she said, I remember. I remember every word. Stella bowed her head. But do you remember the lunch on our first day? Chioma asked. Stella looked up, confused. What? The first day we worked in the market. You forgot your lunch, and you hadn't been paid. I split my portion, with you, only white rice, a little vegetable, and 2 slices of dried fish. Do you know what I was afraid of that day? Stella shook her head. I was afraid you'd mock it. I was afraid you'd look at that food and laugh. I held my breath the whole time. Chioma looked her friend straight in the eyes. But you ate all of it. And the next day you brought lunch for both of us. For 4 years, without missing a day. Stella's tears spilled over again. So, Chioma said, I remember both. I remember the words you said in the market. And I remember the lunch too. I choose to remember both, not just one. She pushed the tissue box toward her friend. I forgive you, Stella. I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry it around anymore. It was heavy. Stella sobbed. But Chioma was not finished. However, I need you to understand one thing. Forgiveness and trust are not the same. We can't go back to how it was on our first day in the market. That is gone. And I think we both know it. Stella nodded, wiping her face. I know. I wouldn't dare hope for that. But, Chioma said, what is gone doesn't mean nothing new is possible. She opened a drawer, took out a business card, and wrote something on the back. You said you sell breakfast on the roadside, right? Yes. For 6 years now. How many plates do you sell in a day? Stella was a little thrown by the question. About 40, 50. Do you keep records? Records, only in my head, more or less. Chioma nodded, and in that moment, Stella saw on her friend's face the very look she had once looked down on, the look of a person doing serious arithmetic. Listen to me. I'm not going to give you money. Don't be upset. Stella shook her head quickly. I told you I didn't come to ask. I know. That's why I won't. But I'll do something else. Chioma slid the card across the desk. My company has a program. Every year we take on 20 micro-businesses, vegetable sellers, breakfast sellers, seamstresses, and we do their books free for a year, teach them how to price, how to separate capital from profit, how to save. We call it the Ndidi program. She pushed the card a little further. I won't give you the fish. I'll teach you to count fish. Will you take it? Stella looked at the card. Then looked up. Her mouth opened but no sound came. One more thing, Chioma said, and for the first time her voice went a little hoarse. Chitty. I want to cover his school fees. From now until the end of secondary school. Stella broke into open sobs, both hands over her face. Why would you do this, after everything I... Chioma sat down in the chair across from her. Because there was a woman, who cracked both of her hands, so that I could sit in this chair, she said. And my mother taught me, that if you climb up one rung of a ladder, and you don't lower the ladder down for the person below, then that rung means nothing at all. She looked at the boy eating in the corner of the room. The boy did nothing wrong, Stella. He shouldn't have to pay for one sentence said in a market. That day, Stella left the office, with a business card, a place in the Ndidi program, and a son, who had eaten his fill. 3 years later, Stella's roadside breakfast spot had become a small covered shop, with 2 helpers, and a clean set of records she kept herself. She was not rich. But she supported her own child, and she no longer needed to look down on anyone to feel that she was standing tall. And Chitty came top of his class that year. He called Chioma Auntie Chi. The 2 women never went back to being as close as they were on that first day in the market. Chioma had spoken the truth, that was gone. But every year, on Chioma's exact birthday, a parcel of food wrapped in banana leaf arrives at the office of Ndidi Consulting. No card. No note. Just a parcel of food. And Chioma always eats all of it. Chioma's story reminds us of a few very simple things. Class is not something other people assign to you. It is something you build yourself, one rung at a time, with your own 2 hands. And the people standing on a ladder they did not build are always the ones who have to look down on others, because deep inside, they know the ladder can be pulled away at any moment. Hands roughened by work are never something to be ashamed of. What is shameful is a clean pair of hands that has never once lifted anyone up. And when you have finally climbed high enough to take revenge on the one who looked down on you, remember that you have another choice. You can lower the ladder. Because real victory is not making people look up at you. It is becoming the person you are proud of when you look in the mirror. If this story touched you, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.